Chapter 2 Commentary. The fundamental virtue of Krishna consciousness is love of God and all things connected to Him. This love is both from God and for God, both for the Creator and the created. One attains this universal love by discrimination, viveka. Without discrimination, one cannot discern the material from the spiritual, the unreal from the real. In mundane consciousness, we constantly confuse and intertwine the real and the unreal. Only through proper discrimination can we distinguish eternal reality as distinct from, although immanent in, the ephemeral reality of material life. It is by discrimination that we gain freedom and can perceive eternal reality within and between every atom of the creation. There are many Vedic literatures given to man for this enlightenment. Bhagavad Gita is the crest jewel and synopsis of them all. It was spoken to Arjuna, a warrior and personal friend of Lord Krishna, for his liberation from the darkness of ignorance. Arjuna's ignorance arose from the misidentification of himself with the material body and its extensions, family, society, and country. Because illusion and ignorance are ever present in this material world, even in our age of advanced science and technology, Bhagavad Gita pertains to us now as much as it did to Arjuna 5,000 years ago. This chapter opens with Lord Krishna assuming his rightful position as the supreme spiritual master, asking his bewildered disciple, "How have doubts born of ignorance entered your heart? They lead not to truth, but to false worlds apart." As a member of the cultured royal order, Arjuna was expected to be advanced in divine consciousness and appreciative of higher spiritual values. He should have known, for example, that he was his spirit soul, not the material body. Instead, he was speaking like a materialist, who neither knows nor cares for things of the spirit. Thus, Lord Krishna asked, as if surprised, "How have doubts born of ignorance entered your heart?" We are all originally pure spiritual entities, but like Arjuna, we have forgotten our real spiritual nature. Therefore, Krishna's question is meant for us too. Although the spirit soul is innately pure, he becomes covered with the illusion of matter due to his desire for sense gratification. Thus, he dreams that he is the material body of flesh and blood. Actually, the living body belongs to the Lord's eternal superior energy, not his temporary inferior energy. Because Arjuna identified himself with the inferior energy, Krishna appeared surprised. How could the superior be overcome by the inferior? We can comprehend this only by understanding that all Krishna's energies are infinite and inconceivable. Furthermore, although we are part of the Lord's superior energy, we are infinitesimally small. For this reason, Lord Chaitanya propounded the Achintya Bheda philosophy of simultaneous oneness and difference. We are one with the Lord in quality, but different from him in quantity. The finite living entity, who is by nature superior, has a tendency to be overwhelmed by the inferior energy. Being finite, not infinite, he is therefore fallible. Actually, because he is an eternal associate of Lord Krishna, Arjuna is always a liberated soul. However, in order that the Bhagavad Gita be spoken for our benefit, he played the part of a conditioned soul and displayed all the symptoms of material illusion, including bewilderment. How can I ever kill or even dishonor a grandsire like Bhishma and a teacher like Drona? Bhishma personifies unquestioning faith, and Drona, who is Arjuna's guru, personifies religious law and tradition. Note the problem. On one hand is instinct, passion, and desire. And on the other hand is religious tradition, law, and custom. The bewilderment of Arjuna, like that experienced by many today, arises from a failure to see the relevance of his religion to contemporary values and problems. This was also the situation at the time of Jesus. On the one hand, representing unrestrained human nature, were the publicans and sinners, and on the other, representing the law and the contemporary religion, were the scribes and Pharisees. No solution could be found on either side. Christ teaches in his gospel, as Lord Krishna does in the Gita, that absolute truth is beyond mundane conflict and the values of material duality. Truth is beyond the reach of all materialists, whether they be Pharisees, sinners, smartas, or sense enjoyers. Arjuna, in the midst of the great battle of life, expresses his confusion thus: "The lot of a beggar would be better for me than to profit from killing these great souls I see. I cannot decide what's to be more condemned, conquering them or being conquered by them. And as for my duty, I feel most confused. My conviction has vanished. I surely will lose." Arjuna feels that he is striving against both his own nature and the customs and institutions of his society. Today, many people feel the same way. They believe that the world in general is corrupt. Some think that the great demon is capitalism and see its corruption and greed everywhere. But for others, the enemy that brutalizes and enslaves mankind is the threat of communism. These are all the reactions of a soul confused and overwhelmed by the illusion of matter. Such a person is unable to understand anything beyond the senses. To be free from the illusion of matter, one must not let himself be controlled by the senses. Rather, he must accept guidance from a bona fide authority, like a self-realized spiritual master, and the Holy Scriptures. These awaken one to the voice of the Lord within. There are no answers on the material platform. Knowing this, Arjuna said, "In my misery I beg you, my Lord, to decide. I'm now your disciple. By your word I'll abide." This is the solution. Surrender to Krishna, the supreme, absolute truth. When we surrender to him, all questions are answered. Transcendental knowledge descends by means of transcendental sound vibration. Those who hear from Lord Krishna or his representative remain free from the material contamination of hankering and lamentation. Despite his confusion, Arjuna had the good sense to surrender to Krishna instead of to his own imperfect senses. Today, we can emulate Arjuna by surrendering to the Lord through the Lord's representative, the spiritual master. Of course, this means abandoning our own opinions, which are usually based on mental speculation or sensory observation. We must approach the spiritual master properly, with sincere inquiry and surrender. There is no use inquiring if we are not prepared to accept the answer of the master. There is no point in making a show of surrender. The brightly colored show bottles on display in drugstore windows cannot cure any ailment. They only contain colored water. Like show bottle medicine, make-believe surrender will not help us. If we want to be cured of our material disease, we must take the real medicine. To be cured, we must be genuine disciples, surrendered souls. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, "In the same measure that one surrenders to me, I reciprocate with him accordingly." We should never try to cheat Krishna, for if we approach him as a cheater, he himself becomes the greatest cheater, like a professional gambler who never loses. But if we surrender to him in love and devotion, he reveals himself as he is and gives us complete protection. Approaching Krishna is like approaching a mirror. You see whatever you present. Interestingly enough, at this point in the Gita, the sage Sanjaya says, "Then smiling, Lord Krishna addressed friend Arjuna. Though speaking wise words, wisdom's heart you've impugned. Neither for living nor dead do the wise lament, knowing the body to be but the soul's vestment. The soul goes on living when the body has passed. It's proved every lifetime that death cannot last. Just as every man journeys from youth to old age, so the soul's transmigration is viewed by the sage." Many great religious teachers have taught reincarnation, although many have also denied it. Whatever position one may take, God remains the ultimate reality, the only eternal. As such, he is the soul of all souls, the life of all lives. Whether one sees one soul or many in a sequence of lives depends on his angle of vision, as when viewing slides on a light table or a movie projector. One may look at hundreds of slides simultaneously or in rapid sequence as in a movie, or he may concentrate on them one by one. Christianity, for example, emphasizes the individual slide, the individual life, whereas Hinduism views an overall sequence of lives in the progress of the soul back to Godhead. In either case, there is only one light. It supplies illumination to one and all. If that light went out, all the slides would be black. Of course, the eternal light of God is always shining, giving life and light to all. Krishna's energy is eternal, every particle of it. Although what we call material is manifest intermittently, the energy itself is eternal. It will never cease to be. It is God himself who is the life of all, manifest in every individual being. This is clearly stated by the Lord. All those who know truth in its reality know well that the real never ceases to be, that the unreal, in fact, does never exist. Such knowledge is gained by those who persist. This perfect knowledge is gained by those who persist in the practice of yoga. The ability to discriminate between the real and the unreal is a distinctive human characteristic. We neither expect nor find such discrimination in animals. Animals simply eat, sleep, defend, and mate. But man, in addition to these human activities, has the ability to distinguish the real from the unreal, the spiritual from the material. This is the breath of God, which distinguishes man from beast. By discrimination, man can find the eternal, the Atman, or soul, distinct form, although immanent in, everything that exists. The ability to see the unchanging in the changing, the infinite in the finite, and the eternal in the temporal, is the essence of wisdom. The great poet William Blake expresses this vision beautifully in Auguries of Innocence. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. Understanding that Arjuna's confusion is rooted in his failure to distinguish between the real and the unreal, the soul and the body, Lord Krishna begins his discourse by explaining the nature of the soul. The force that pervades these bodies is spirit. The body will perish, but not the soul in it. The soul is primeval, eternal, unstained. It is not hurt, even if the body is slain. Enlightened men know that the soul cannot die. It can never be killed, or kill others, say I. Just as old clothing is replaced by the new, the soul gets new bodies to enter into. Since the soul is eternal, without beginning or end, why grieve for it? Krishna also points out that there is no use grieving for the body, since its destruction is inevitable. Why grieve for the inevitable? Do people grieve for leaves that are destined to fall from the trees in autumn? Surely, in the springtime, new leaves will blossom. The body is always changing, but the soul, like the tree, remains complete. In due course, new leaves and new bodies will come, replacing the old and useless ones. Why should an intelligent man lament these inevitable changes? Krishna then argues from another angle. Though whoever's reborn must once again die, even so, dear Arjuna, there is no need to cry. The birth and death cycle turns just like a wheel, so remember your duty and fight on with zeal. The modern world tries desperately to maintain an illusion about death. Death is seldom discussed. Indeed, it is hidden as much as possible. When not, it is glamorized and quickly glossed over. People want to believe that death is the end. They rarely want to see through the grand illusion of the body, or to understand that the spirit soul is simply shedding a useless and worn-out covering to take on a new one. In its new vesture, the soul will experience a new and perhaps better life. Unfortunately, most men choose to be ignorant of their real existence as spirit soul, preferring an existence of mortal sense enjoyment no more real than a dream. Yet some do go beyond the dream. Many sages and rishis, wise scholars, through meditation, discipline, study, renunciation, spiritual struggle, and conflict, do manage to reach the knowledge that surpasses mundane understanding. Such knowledge culminates in a realization of the omniscient, omnipresent, unchanging, everlasting spirit within. The search for such knowledge is a tremendous undertaking, and its attainment is the greatest achievement. This is the aim of all true religion and the goal of human life. No religious tradition has a monopoly on the search for God. The Jewish prophets, for example, also experienced transcendental reality. When Elijah went into a cave to seek the Lord, he heard great thunder, saw blazing lightning, and felt an earthquake. Yet Elijah said that the Lord was not in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in a still small voice. 1 Kings 19:11-12. This surely is a valid experience of the Absolute, the voice of God within, which awakens one to the ultimate reality. In Bhagavad Gita, however, the Lord presents a profound and systematic philosophy of the nature of the soul. Krishna points out that even if a person thinks the soul dies, he should not lament. If the soul exists only for a time and then is gone, so what? If the body is only a pile of chemicals to be used for some time and then thrown away, so what? Why lament for chemicals? In modern warfare, millions of tons of chemicals are destroyed, but who laments for their loss? Why then should we lament for a perishable soul? If the soul is material and soon perishes, why worry about it? If, on the other hand, the soul is spiritual and thus immutable, why worry about it? Of course, Krishna teaches that the soul is eternal and immutable and transmigrates from body to body. This view is also found in the Platonic tradition that is echoed throughout Western literature. Most familiar, perhaps, are the lines of Wordsworth. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath elsewhere its settling. and cometh from afar. Wordsworth's language beautifully expresses the mystery of transmigration. This knowledge cannot be completely communicated in words, to be sure, but at least we can feel some of its awe and wonder. Throughout the world, great poets and sages have tried to evoke what Rudolf Otto has called the idea of the holy. God is indeed the greatest mystery, the unfathomable person. Lord Krishna urges Arjuna to act in spiritual knowledge and rise above bodily considerations, namely, to act on the transcendental platform, reminding us that life's real conflict is a battle in which we fight against our lower nature and the powers of evil. This battle must be waged despite joy and sorrow, success and failure. In the words of St. Ignatius of Loyola, this is a call to holy indifference, by which one can realize himself to be different from the gross material body and ultimately part and parcel of God. Such knowledge of one's true identity bestows perfect equilibrium even in the midst of the greatest dualities, such as good and evil, pleasure and pain. After all material and spiritual considerations, Krishna advises, remember your duty and fight on with zeal. We must transcend all considerations of our personal happiness and distress, victory and defeat, loss and gain, everything, and just fight because Krishna wants it. This is perfect knowledge, duty, love, and surrender. It is the advice we receive again and again throughout the Gita. Next, Krishna begins to explain another kind of yoga. Thus far have I spoken philosophic wisdom. Now hear of my yoga, which brings one to freedom. On this path there is no loss, so be of good cheer. Just a little advancement relieves one from fear. Those who walk on this path are determined and strong. Since their goal is one only, they never go wrong. Whereas mundane consciousness is irresolute, goes from object to object, like a prostitute. Sankhya philosophy is perhaps the oldest Hindu system of metaphysics. It is one of the 6 systems, or darshanas, of Vedic philosophy. The first is called Nyaya, which is a form of logic as complete and advanced as Aristotle's. The second is Vaisheshika, a system of cosmology, a philosophy of nature that includes an atomic theory reminiscent of Democritus. It is very interesting and significant that, at the same time, and apparently independently, the Greeks and Indians developed similar cosmologies. Then came the systems of Sankhya and Yoga. Aristotle would have called Sankhya metaphysics, for it deals with the basic constitution of all things. Like the Chinese yin and yang, Sankhya divides everything into 2 principles, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is spirit or consciousness, whereas Prakriti is matter or nature. Purusha is male and Prakriti is female. According to Sankhya philosophy, the entire creation evolves from the interaction of these 2 principles. The breathing and body posture exercises that we generally associate with yoga are the practical expressions of that metaphysics, whereas Sankhya philosophy is the theoretical expression, the theoretical exposition. Factually, the first line of the passage above might be translated, "Thus you have heard the theory. Now I'll tell you of the practice." The Gita presents the knowledge of Sankhya both practically and theoretically. First, Krishna proclaims that there is one eternal self or spirit, present everywhere. This self forms the basis of all reality. Then, Krishna shows how such knowledge can be integrated into one's life through the practice of yoga. Specifically, this science is called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti means love and devotion. It is by Bhakti that we are awakened to our eternal loving relationship with God, the Lord in the heart, who is the chariot driver of every living entity. Through his perfect instructions, he guides us to victory in the battle of life. Krishna takes us across the dangerous ocean of birth and death, back to his eternal abode, the kingdom of God, the realm of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, the planet Vaikuntha. To reassure Arjuna, who is, after all, a warrior and not a philosopher, Krishna explains that in striving to attain yoga, ultimate success is sure. On this path, there's no loss, so be of good cheer. Just a little advancement relieves one from fear. This wonderful verse inspires faith and hope even for a new devotee. It guarantees us that even 1% advancement in Krishna consciousness is worth more than all the wealth in the world. Just for a little advancement in Krishna consciousness can protect from falling into a lower species of life. Krishna consciousness is all auspicious. There are no defects on this path. Material opulences are usually obtained with great effort and often illegally or immorally. Thus, they tend to entangle one more and more in the complicated cycle of action and reaction, including birth and death. On the other hand, even the humblest devotee, by rendering menial services like sweeping the temple floor, opening the door for devotees, or carrying some water for the deity, can favorably serve and please God. Thus he can go back home, back to Godhead at the end of life. Lord Krishna says, "Those who walk on this path are determined and strong. Since their goal is one only, they never go wrong." Scatterbrained materialists are a fact of daily experience. Ultimately, materialists cannot be resolutely determined for anything. Being illusioned, they think that they are the body and that their aim is sense gratification. Therefore, their intelligence is many-branched. Since the senses are many, they are always flickering with many desires. Materialists cannot be steady. A person in Krishna consciousness, however, is fixed. His intelligence is steady, and he is resolute in his purpose. Why? Because he is convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the supreme controller, enjoyer, and protector of everything. A devotee is therefore very peaceful. He is happy simply serving Krishna instead of serving the insatiable senses. Krishna, moreover, is easily pleased. Even a leaf or flower or a little fruit and water is sufficient to satisfy him when offered with love and devotion. A pure devotee is centered on Krishna and single-minded, fixed in consciousness. Thus he is always happy. Transcendentally established, he passes through the material world without being entangled in the various snares of illusion. In this material world there is danger at every step. Still Krishna promises, "Please fulfill my desire, that is all that I ask. Then peace and contentment will be yours at last." Thus, Krishna establishes the yoga of personal devotion to himself as the ultimate goal of life. This is the major theme of the Gita. Over and over again, the Lord repeats the theme of Sri Upanishad. Everything is, and that's the first Upanishad, or the Supreme. Everything is the property of the Lord. In this material world, men are falsely claiming God's property as their own. Thus they become thieves. They must then be punished by material nature for their criminality. A devotee, however, is in pure consciousness. He knows that Krishna is the only proprietor and enjoyer, and that all living entities are his servants. He also knows that God is the actual performer of all activities. The living entity desires, and the Lord supplies the objects of his desire. Man proposes, and God disposes. When a devotee's realization of this is mature, he chooses to act as God's instrument, confident that the Lord knows what is best. Giving up forbidden and offensive action, the devotee renders loving service to the Lord. One who considers himself to be the doer is a madman, and must be content to suffer in his madness. Misusing his minute independence, which is meant for loving God, he loves the object of his senses and tries to enjoy the results of his actions. Thus he creates another material body for himself through karmic reaction. One who is intelligent must ask, what compels a man, even against his own interest and reason, to endeavor for sense gratification? Maya is the reply. The ignorance and illusion arising from thinking that I am this body. Lord Krishna further explains that transcendental consciousness never manifests in a mind addicted to sense gratification. The man of true wisdom thinks always of me. Not enslaved by his mind, he is happy and free. He derives his enjoyment from myself alone. His mind remains pure. He has not to atone. We thus return to the major subject of this chapter, proper discrimination between the body and the soul. Lord Krishna reminds Arjuna that the senses are strong and difficult to control. Unless one is sincere and attentive, he may fall down. The only remedy is to think of him always and act only for his satisfaction. Problems arise when our senses are not serving him, for at such times the senses seek their own satisfaction. An idle mind is the devil's workshop, but senses engaged in service to the Lord are perfectly satisfied. The Lord then explains how one falls down. By dwelling on objects of sense satisfaction, one becomes soon attached to impious action. From attachment comes lust. Lust thwarted turns to rage. Then delusion overwhelms, even a sage. One's memory is clouded when delusion takes place. Then he gives up my service to live in disgrace. With intelligence thus lost, life loses real worth, and he enters again the cycle of rebirth. The descent begins with a contemplation of sense objects. At this initial stage, a devotee has a chance to correct himself. As soon as we find ourselves thinking of sense gratification, we must use our intelligence to halt the process before attachment develops. If we do not, attachments form and lust arises. Then it is too late. We should counter this degradation in the very beginning by using our intelligence and powers of discrimination. Is this right or is this wrong? Will this help my Krishna consciousness, or will it make me forgetful of my Lord? In this way, the intelligence is used to serve the Lord instead of the senses. How can we know what is favorable to Krishna consciousness and what is not? The order of the spiritual master is our guideline. I shouldn't do this because it will displease my spiritual master. As long as the intelligence discriminates, we have full liberty, full independence. We can save ourselves and escape the whirlpool that leads to the degradation of the soul. But one who controls the demands of the senses, keeping the principles, avoiding offenses, is quickly enlightened by my mercy most kind. Plain living, high thinking, he's not bound by the mind. By following the regulative principles, we enjoy real freedom. A devotee in Krishna consciousness can realize the truth of this paradox. A sense indulger cannot, however, for he equates freedom with sense indulgence. Thus, he engages in many prohibited acts such as illicit sex, intoxication, animal slaughter, and gambling. These activities do not bring freedom, but bondage. The more one breaks the laws of God, the more he becomes bound up by the laws of material nature. Of course, we cannot give up the desire for sense gratification artificially or all at once, but by dovetailing our senses in the service of the Lord, we can feel transcendently satisfied and happy. We can be liberated from the desire for sense gratification by engaging our senses in Krishna-conscious activities, hearing about the Lord's uncommon, wonderful pastimes, eating spiritual food offered to the Lord with love and devotion, and singing the most wonderful songs, the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When a man fills his stomach, his hunger automatically goes away. Similarly, as soon as we render transcendental loving service to the Lord, we automatically satisfy our senses. In this way, we attain peace and Krishna consciousness, make our lives perfect, and go back home to Godhead. The Lord himself promises, if your mind's fixed on me, though you be on death's bed, you will enter Vaikuntha, go back to Godhead. In my experience, rendering transcendental devotional service to the Lord by singing Hare Krishna does not always satisfy my sense desires. But in practicing complete balance of yoga and tantra, I find my desires ever increasing toward God.